of Tomorrow, episode 9, the lowest common denominator. And it's your boy Icon back with a little DC TV. So, in this particular episode of Legends, it takes place, in the last episode, we got the robot side of things, like the robot side of the story. It showed the scene where the gang was actually in the airplane hangar when they got attacked by the robots, and then they jumped in the time machine and then they blasted off. So now this shows you where they ended up at. They actually ended up back in the pocket dimension inside Constantine's house. And Gideon said that she sent them there because when they all ran and jumped into the time machine, somebody said, "Take us home, Gideon." And for her, the pocket dimension house actually felt like home. Unfortunately, when they got to the house, though, everybody was a little disappointed, and they were just like, "Oh, Gideon's a little off because she brought us here." And Gideon couldn't figure it out because she was just like, "No." She's like, "I kind of did this on purpose." They're just like, "Oh, but you're distracted. You got a fever. Maybe you should go lay down." And they kind of like dismissed her and like shrugged her off. So Gideon was kind of feeling some kind of way. And then Gary showed up, and then he was like, "Let's go upstairs and do the deed." And then the two of them went upstairs to do the deed. Gwen's character, he wasn't used to being in hell, and he opened the doors to hell, and he kind of like freaked out. And unfortunately, when he opened the doors to hell, he let, some pests, if you will, into the house. So now the whole team is starting to act funny. Like everybody's getting a little hot, and everyone's emotions are starting to become a little wild. Like Zari 2.0 and Nate, the two of them almost, had a kissing moment. There was a moment where Bayrod and Astra almost kissed each other. And then after that, like Sarah was kind of like blowing off, like her captain duties, and then Ava was trying to reel her back in. And then they ended up going into the room where Gary and Gideon were having sex. And then the two of them saw them having sex and started screaming. And then the whole crew came upstairs, and then they all started screaming. And then they kind of like shamed Gary, and Gideon for doing what they did. And then even Astra, she was like, "I'm gonna," because Astra kind of like, she's overprotective of Gideon, so she was gonna kill Gary. Then that's when they realized, they were just like, "Well, how long have you two been hooking up?" And then when Gary and Gideon was like, "We've been hooking up for a while now since the Chernobyl incident," that's when everybody was just like, "Well, no wonder why Gideon took us to the wrong place, because she's being distracted by Gary." And they kind of blamed Gary for the whole thing, and their relationship, which was kind of, that wasn't right. Nate was the only one that basically kind of like gave him thumbs up for it, but then somebody had made a comment. They were just like, "Oh, it feels like we're on a bad reality TV show." And then that's when it dawned on Astra what was going on, because she said that there was a group, like a film crew. I think they were called the Hell Crew, and it was a studio that basically sold their souls to the devil because they wanted a hit reality TV show. The person in hell that they sold their souls to, he made a deal with them that they would be under his control producing bad reality TV until they can produce like an authentic, genuine moment. Because as we all know, like reality shows aren't real and they're all fabricated. So the guy was basically just like, "Well, if you guys can capture something real on a reality show, then, I'll let you out of your contract and your souls can rest in peace." Obviously that never happened, because that's not how reality shows work. And they were forever like trapped trying to, capture that, that perfect moment from any sort of human that they can capture it from. So now, and then Astra even said, Astra was like, she said, "Okay, now that we know what's going on," she's like, "I'm going to go talk to the producer to see if I can get him to get the crew out of here." But she said, "But in the meantime, you guys need to keep your emotions in check, because the spirits, like the ghosts, like the film crew, they're producing the show, and they're going to kind of like push you guys in certain directions to get you out of whack." Because she was like, "Don't succumb to your emotions." So obviously that's exactly what happened. There was a moment where Zari and Nate, first they were going to do the deed, then they got into a fight with each other because they were just like, "Oh, we're best friends, like you're my bro Ed." And I'm like, "When did that happen?" And then, he was just like, "Yeah," he's like, like, "I'm married to your, to your doppelganger, the original version of you." He was like, "I love the original version of you." And he was like, "You and I would never sleep together in a million years." And then she was like, "What?" she was like, "What you trying to say?" And then like the two of them got into an argument and they started beefing. Spooner did this whole thing where Spooner acted like she was on Survivor, because everybody was doing like a different reality show. Like Nate and Zari, for some reason, they thought they were on the Jersey Shore. Spooner thought she was on Survivor, and she walked around naked the whole time, because she was just like, her walking around naked will distract everybody and it'll get them off their game. And I'm like, game for what? Now, with that being said, and I'm sorry, if it was, I don't know why no one, excuse my terminology, but I don't know why anybody wasn't trying to hit that. Because if that was me, if I was trapped in that house, I'd have been all over Spooter. I'm just saying. Sarah and Ava was pretty funny because Sarah came straight out of the Real Housewives. Like, she did the whole big ass earrings. There was a moment where they were at the dinner table and she started doing the clapping, and I was like, kudos to Katie Lotz for that, because I actually thought that was funny. She was ignoring, like the mission, and she was just trying to go on a vacation. And then Ava was upset because she felt like she was being overworked. And then Gary and Gideon, like, they were talking, and then Gary accidentally said the L word, and then Gideon got all funny about it. And then the producer of the TV show, he ended up talking to Gideon, and he convinced the Gideon to put her emotions to the side and only focus on her computer aspects and on her CPU. So then Gideon went full like demon mode on everybody, and she spent the rest of the time going through the house creating controversy, creating good TV, good trash reality TV. She was making people turn on each other. She was talking about alliances, and meanwhile Gary's like watching the whole thing because she broke up with Gary, and then he got all upset. But Gary noticed something was wrong with her, and he was going around watching her to see what she was doing. He was like, Gideon's actually in here like causing trouble. She's like stirring the pot with everything. So then Bayrod, of all people, he was the one aspect of the whole thing that he was different from everybody else. When Astra went down to go talk to the producer, she was just like, oh, those are my souls, leave them alone. And he was going to pull his camera crew out. But then Bayrod showed up. He got busted by security. And then when the producer guy realized that Astra kind of had a thing for him, he realized she had a weakness, and then he was able to control her, and he put both of them back on the show. Astra wanted to have a conversation with Bayrod, asking him like, why did you follow me? I told you that I had this handled. And then that's when Bayrod kind of got like, he folded up a little bit, because he was like, listen, he was like, we can talk, but he was like, I don't want to talk in front of the cameras. And then she was like, well, you don't have a choice because we're on a TV show. And then he kind of like folded up and like he hid under the bed, because they said that ever since Chernobyl, he hasn't smoked any weed. He hasn't taken any edibles. He's been pretty much sober through it, like for the last like 3 episodes. So now, like, he said he's present in the moment, and he's kind of like going crazy because like all the stuff that he tries to avoid, due to the marijuana, all his thoughts and his feelings are starting to come back. So he basically stayed in the room and hid in the bed, and then Astra got mad and she walked out. Gwen, he walked up to Sarah and he reminded Sarah, he was just like, oh, remember when you said that I could save, like my, like the man that I love or whatever. And then he was like kind of like, pushing it, because he was just like, listen, he said, I did my part of the deed. He said that I invented time travel. He's like, I gave you time travel. Now it's your turn to honor your portion of the deal and save that one, and save that one soul. And then Sarah was just like, oh my God. She was just like, fine. She wrote down on a piece of paper, she was like, you get to save one soul, but she never specified who it was. She just gave him the paper and she walked away. So now that Gideon basically pulled the strings around and got everybody all riled up and fired up, they bring everybody to the dinner table. And then that's when the whole powder keg, as they say, exploded, where everybody got mad. They started yelling at each other. They were getting on each other's nerves. Gwen had mentioned, the fact that Sarah gave him the paper to save one soul, and then Ava got mad and she was like, what the hell, and then Sarah looked at him and she was like, and then when he said that instead of saving the person that he loved, he wanted to save the person who got assassinated, which sparked the Great War. And then that's when Sarah was like, bro, she was like, yo, she's like, that's not why I gave you the paper. She said, I gave you the paper to save one insignificant person, not to prevent the entire world war. And then that's when Ava got upset, and then it turned this whole big thing. Zari 1.0 came out of the totem, and then she threw champagne on everybody when she realized they were in hell, and then they were chasing everybody around. Gideon said that she was going to put like the time machine helmet on thingy, and she was going to transport everybody into a tornado and kill them. And then Gary grabbed the helmet, and he wouldn't give him back the helmet. And then Bayrod came out of the room, threw his weed gummy, because like the producer actually snuck some weed gummies into Bayrod's room and tried to trick him into taking the marijuana. And he threw the glass on the floor. He shattered the marijuana. Then he was just like, oh, this just reminds me of when I was a teenager. Because in Zari and Bayrod's time, because they're from the future, they were on a reality show called Keeping Up with the Tarajis, or Cute, or I think that's what they called it. He didn't like having the cameras in his face capturing every single moment. He said that it was an invasion of privacy. He was overwhelmed. He even said, he was like, yo, you want to know the first time I ever failed as a child? He said, well, go pull up the episode, because it was there for the world to see. And he got to a point where he said that in order for me to escape the reality show, in order for me to not have my life put out there, he said the way to beat it was, he said, I basically got high all the time and I stayed in my room, because since I was high all the time and I was chill, it kept me from being like overexerted. It kept me from like showing my ass on TV, and it didn't give them anything good that they can film because I wasn't falling for the propaganda. But we know, which kind of turned him into the person that he is now. But it also got him kicked off the reality show because Zari said that they recast him because he actually was boring and he wasn't fun. But that's what he wanted. And then, you know, he spoke to everybody else. He was just like, listen, he said, all I wanted, he said that because he was high all the time, all he wanted was just to ask Astra out on a date, you know, be with his friends and blah, blah, blah. But because of his marijuana and because of him trying to check out, he said that he never got a chance to talk about his emotions. He never got a chance to express his emotions. He said he died like in 2 different timelines and never even talked about it. He never had the courage to ask Astra out on a date. And then he was just like, I don't know where the old me starts and the new me begins. And he was just all confused. And then, you know, after that, then the Hell crew, like the camera crew, they popped up, and then the TV show ended up going off the air because the contract that the TV crew had signed with the producer, they ended up honoring the contract because what they captured from Bayrod was a real genuine moment. It was him putting his genuine feelings out there and him pouring out his guts, and that's something that you don't get on reality TV. So once the curse was lifted, the camera crew left. Everybody kind of like went back to normal. Spooner was still walking around butt ass naked because she said she kind of got comfortable with it at that point. And, you know, everybody apologized to everybody else. And then they apologized to Zari. And then they apologized to Gideon and Gary because they were just like, oh, yeah, tried to make fun of our relationship. But you guys have made relationships with each other under the most worst of circumstances. So she was like, it's kind of hypocritical for you guys to be in relationships and it's perfectly fine, but you're scoffing at me and Gary. And then they apologized for that. They apologized for saying that Gideon couldn't do the job, you know, because she was involved with Gary. Because like Gideon said, all of you still perform your jobs admirably despite the fact that you got into these weird relationships. So then they asked Gideon, they were just like, okay, you know, we apologize. What's the plan, Gideon? Tell us what we're going to do. And then she was like, oh, we're going to go back to the World War. We're going to save that guy from getting assassinated. And everybody was like, hold up. And that's actually a good plan because what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out how to stop evil Gideon. They're trying to figure out how to stop evil Gideon, the evil Wave Rider, and they're trying to figure out how to stop the evil robot versions of themselves. So Gideon's plan actually makes perfect sense because if you bring them to the World War and you actively try to save the time, if you mess up the timeline by actively trying to prevent the person who got killed to begin with, then robot Gideon's gonna pop up during, you know, like during World War I or whatever, and she's gonna try to stop you, and that's your chance where you can pounce on her and, you know, like you can kind of get the upper hand on her. So that was actually a very good play by Gideon, and we'll see how it unfolds. In the coming attractions for next week's episode, it actually shows them, you know, like they've actually reached a fixed point in time where nothing can be changed at that point. They're in a place where everything stays exactly the same. So it'll be interesting to see how they break through that fixed point, you know, and how they proceed going forward and where evil Gideon comes in. Bayrod and Astra didn't get together because they almost kissed, but then Bayrod was just like, listen, he was like, I'm kind of sober right now and I'm losing my shit. He's like, I just need to figure out who sober me is first before you and I can get into a relationship. So that was it. That was it. Cool, you know, cool, fun episode. Thank you for tuning in. So, you know, no complaints about there, you know, especially when it comes to Spooner. And, you know, like I said, it's always nice to see Zari 1.0 back again. So we'll see what happens. This episode was a filler episode that basically set up the next episode, and I'm kind of interested to see where the next episode goes. So hit me up on Twitter and Instagram. Share your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think about what's happening with Legends so far. Let me know what you think about evil Gideon, you know, about the evil robot, you know, Wave Rider crew and where everything folds and how this whole thing goes on as we ride to the end. Because we're only up to episode 9, so for Legends, we're probably going to get maybe 5 or 6 more episodes because they only get about 15, 16 episodes a season anyway. So as I said, so check me out on Twitter and Instagram. We got Batwoman coming up. You know, I got my Superman and Lois review already up on the channel. I got my Naomi review up on the channel as well. Like I said, more Legends of Tomorrow, and we're still doing that Peacemaker. So thanks for tuning in, guys. So until next time, watch your reality TV, check your remote, and as always, I'm out this.